Imagine being trapped in a room for your entire childhood. No laughter, no friends, no freedom. Every sound you make punished, every movement controlled. This was Genie. For 13 years, the world outside disappeared, and she lived in silence, fear, and isolation. Darkness behind closed doors. Every neighborhood has its secrets. Behind curtains drawn tight, behind doors that never open, behind smiles that hide bruises. There are lives we cannot see. Some are ordinary struggles. Some are scars no one notices. But some are horrors. In the late 1960s, on a quiet street in Arcadia, California, one of the most disturbing cases of hidden abuse in American history was unfolding. Neighbors passed by a modest house, never knowing that inside a father was building his own private prison. The prisoner was not a stranger, not an enemy, but his own daughter, a little girl he swore was damaged from birth. When the truth finally came out, the world was horrified. A child who had grown up in silence, strapped to chairs, bound in cribs, denied love, denied words, denied freedom. Her name was Genie. The man responsible was her father, Clark Wiley. This is not just the story of a victim, nor just the story of a criminal. It is the story of how hatred, silence, and control destroyed a family and left behind one of the most haunting psychological mysteries of all time. Before we begin, if you're drawn to the hidden, the disturbing, and the unforgettable, Clark Wiley was not born a monster, but he chose to become one. Born in the early 1900s, Clark grew up with hardship pressing down on him from every direction. His childhood was shaped by poverty, instability, and a constant sense of disappointment. Those who knew him described a man who hardened quickly, who grew bitter instead of resilient. Life had beaten him, and instead of fighting back with hope, he fought back with rage. He developed a hatred, not for one person, not for one enemy, but for the world itself. Clark Wiley despised weakness. He despised noise. He despised anything that reminded him of vulnerability. By the time he reached adulthood, this hatred had curdled into something toxic. When he met Irene Oglesby, he found someone he could dominate. Irene was quiet, timid, and nearly blind from a degenerative condition. For Clark, she was the perfect partner, not in love, but in control. Their marriage was not built on affection, but on fear. Clark demanded obedience. Irene gave it because she had little choice. Their children entered this environment like soldiers dropped into enemy territory. Clark didn't treat them as family, he treated them as burdens. His first child, a baby girl, died after only 2 months. His second child, a boy named Robert, was handed over to relatives to be raised far away from Clark's shadow. A third child, John, remained in the household, but grew up under the constant threat of his father's violence. And then came their fourth child, a daughter born in 1957. Her real name was Susan, but the world would come to know her as Genie. From the very start, Clark viewed her as defective. A doctor suggested she might have developmental delays, though these were likely minor. To most parents, such words would inspire care, protection, and love. But to Clark, they were confirmation. Confirmation that his daughter was a mistake. And Clark Wiley had no tolerance for mistakes. From that moment forward, he declared war. Not on society, not on strangers, but on his own child. He decided that Genie would live not as a daughter, but as a prisoner. He built a cage of silence around her. He stripped her of every human experience that makes us who we are. While the world outside went on with its cars, schools, laughter, and music, inside Clark's house, time stopped. He became her captor. He became her tormentor. And soon he would become the architect of one of the darkest chapters in true crime history, a throne of silence and chains. From the outside, Clark Wiley's home looked ordinary, but inside he had created his own twisted kingdom. At its center was a throne, not of gold or velvet, but of straps and wood. By the time Genie reached 10 years old, her body was broken by neglect. Her legs were stiff, her walk unsteady, her frame malnourished. She had no words, only faint noises that never became speech. Her eyes were enormous, always searching, but they carried only pain. Clark had created exactly what he wanted: a child erased, a child silenced, a child reduced to nothing more than an object under his control. But silence cannot last forever. Even the most tightly sealed prison has cracks. And in 1970, those cracks would finally split open. The blind mother and the breaking point Irene Wiley had lived in fear for decades. Clark controlled her every move, every choice, every thought. But by 1970, her eyesight had deteriorated so badly that she could no longer ignore her condition. She was nearly blind, and she knew she couldn't survive alone under Clark's rule forever. One October day, she reached her breaking point. Gathering what little courage she had left, she made a decision that would change everything. She took Genie by the hand, walked out of that suffocating house, and entered the world Clark had spent years hiding from them. It was Genie's first real step outside the prison of her childhood. She was 13 years old, but she had never known parks, schools, playgrounds, or friends. The world outside was a blur of lights, noise, and movement. To her, it must have felt alien, terrifying, and strange. Irene wasn't seeking justice that day. She was seeking survival. She went to a welfare office in Temple City, hoping to apply for disability benefits. She was desperate for financial help, for a way to live independently from Clark. But when she walked into that office, holding Genie beside her, everything changed. The staff froze. They saw a girl with a shuffling gait, her posture twisted, her eyes wide and vacant. Her face was pale, her frame frail, her movements unnatural. She looked half her age, like a small, malnourished child. She barely spoke, making only strange noises, fragments of words that didn't form sentences. The welfare officer knew instantly. Something was horribly wrong. This was not just a case of poverty or disability. This was something darker, something criminal. Within hours, authorities were contacted. Police and social workers descended on the Wiley home, and what they found confirmed the unthinkable. Genie had lived her entire life in near total isolation, strapped to chairs, locked in cribs, beaten into silence. She had been hidden away like a secret, starved of love, language, and freedom. The discovery shocked California. A feral child right in the middle of suburban Los Angeles. Newspapers spread the story, television covered it, people across the country were horrified. But as the headlines grew, one question hung over everything. What would happen to the man who had done this? The child who stepped out of the shadows for Genie. Her rescue was both salvation and chaos. Doctors rushed to examine her. Psychologists documented her every movement. Linguists recorded her attempts at words. She became an object of fascination overnight. To the outside world, Genie was a mystery, a living experiment. Could a child who had been denied language and social contact for so long ever recover? Could she learn to speak, to connect, to live a normal life? To the media, she was a symbol. Reporters described her wide, haunting eyes. They called her the feral child, a phrase that carried both curiosity and tragedy. Her face was splashed across newspapers. Her story was told on television screens. But for Genie herself, the world must have been overwhelming. After years of silence, she was suddenly surrounded by voices, cameras, and strangers. She was touched, studied, spoken to. She had no frame of reference for any of it. And in the background, the man who had caused it all remained in his house, silent, waiting. The monster's last words. Clark Wiley never faced a courtroom. He never stood trial. He never explained himself to the public. On November 20th, 1970, just days after Genie's story exploded into headlines, Clark took his own life. He used a shotgun, ending his existence with the same violence he had inflicted on his family. Beside his body, authorities found a single note. It read, "The world will never understand." It was not an apology, not a confession, not even an explanation. Just a final act of defiance, as if the cruelty he had inflicted was too complex, too dark for anyone else to comprehend. In truth, his note revealed more than he realized. He was right. The world would never understand. No one could truly understand the mind of a man who could cage his daughter, silence her voice, and erase her childhood. But Clark Wiley's death left behind something he could not control, the survival of his daughter. For the first time in her life, Genie was free, but freedom came with a new kind of prison, the feral child of California. When the world first saw Genie, it was as if a ghost had stepped out of the shadows of suburbia. She was 13, but her body seemed frozen in childhood. Her frame was frail, her movements stiff and bird-like, her eyes wide with a haunting mixture of fear and curiosity. Doctors at the Los Angeles Children's Hospital gathered around her with awe and disbelief. They were trained to heal broken bones, to treat sickness, to stitch wounds. But Genie's wounds were invisible, carved into her very mind. She could not speak. She had no words, no sentences, no way to tell her story. She communicated in gestures, in faint murmurs, in movements that seemed unnatural for a child her age. Her silence was not peaceful. It was the heavy silence of a life stolen. To the scientists, Genie was more than a child. She was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For centuries, philosophers and linguists had argued, was language something humans were born with, or something they had to be taught during childhood? Was there a critical period for learning speech? A window that once closed could never reopen? Genie became the living test case. Linguists, psychologists, and neurologists surrounded her. They filmed her, studied her, and wrote notes with feverish excitement. Here was a human child who had grown up without language, raised in isolation like a wild child. But in modern America, not in the forests or caves of old legends. But freedom came with a price. The world no longer saw her as a daughter. They saw her as an experiment. Experiments on a broken-souled Genie's discovery did not just shake the public. It electrified the scientific world. To the researchers who gathered around her, she was not only a survivor of unimaginable cruelty, but also the embodiment of a question that had haunted linguistics and psychology for centuries. Was there a critical period for language? No one had ever had such an opportunity. Here was a child, already 13 years old, who had been raised without words, without conversation, without human interaction beyond punishment and silence. If she could now learn language, it might prove that humans could acquire speech at any age. If she could not, it would prove that the window of language learning truly closed in childhood. And so, Genie became both patient and experiment. Doctors, linguists, and psychologists formed teams around her. At the Los Angeles Children's Hospital, she was studied daily. They filmed her. They tracked her gestures. They recorded her smallest sounds. Each attempt at communication was treated like a breakthrough. At first, progress was astonishing. Genie began to pick up words. She could point to objects and name them. Dog, blue, cup. Her vocabulary grew, and with it, her ability to make sense of the world. She loved colors, fascinated by their brightness. She loved to draw. For a time, she seemed to blossom, her mind stretching out of the cage Clark had built. But there was a catch, one that baffled the researchers. Genie could learn words, but not grammar. She could say, blue cup. She could say, dog run. But she could not form sentences in the way children naturally do. She spoke in fragments, pieces of language that never quite fused together. It was as though her mind had missed the window where grammar takes root, where language flows naturally. The very thing scientists had suspected, the critical period, seemed to be unfolding before their eyes. The team around her was thrilled. Papers were written. Theories were confirmed. Genie was transforming from victim into proof, from tragedy into discovery. But beneath the excitement, something darker was happening. Genie was still a child, a broken, traumatized child who needed care, love, stability. And instead, she was surrounded by clipboards and cameras. Her every smile was studied, her every failure dissected. She was praised as a miracle, but behind the praise was exploitation. The people who should have protected her were pulling her in different directions, each one wanting to claim a piece of the story. Some researchers wanted to advance their careers. Others fought over custody, over who should control Genie's future. The lines between science and humanity blurred. She was no longer just Genie, she was the experiment. And slowly, the girl who had once been chained to a potty chair was now chained by something else, the insatiable curiosity of the world. The same society that had failed to protect her for 13 years was now failing her again, under the guise of study. The betrayal of science and the return to darkness. For a while, the world believed Genie's story might turn toward hope. The child who had been locked in silence was finally free. She was learning words, smiling for the first time, showing flashes of a person she might become. But hope, like everything else in Genie's life, would not last. The world had consumed her story and then spit her out, moving on to the next headline. But Genie was still alive, still fragile, still carrying the weight of the silence her father had carved into her soul. And now she remains silent still. A silence that speaks louder than any words she could have ever learned. If this story gripped you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Genie's life would have been different if the scientists had chosen compassion over curiosity? Or was her fate sealed the moment Clark Wiley locked the door? Because in the end, her father's words remain like a curse over her life. The world will never understand,